Imagine a child calmly telling his father, "A nun visits me every night." Before we begin, I want to make a small disclaimer. Any movie clips I use are from Warner Bros. Pictures and are only being used under fair use for educational and informative commentary. Okay, now I want you to hold two images in your mind. In the first, there's a dimly lit farmhouse. A crucifix trembles on the wall. A priest whispers Latin. A husband grips his wife's hand as something unseen moves in the dark. In the second, there's a modest house in Connecticut. A couple sits at a kitchen table, surrounded by tape recorders, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes. No orchestral soundtrack, no dramatic lighting, just two people who believed, or said they believed, that the supernatural was not metaphor, but fact. Both images point to the same names, Ed and Lorraine Warren, and the tension between those two images, cinematic myth and quiet reality, is where this story lives. Also known, sometimes translated differently, but always referring to the same controversial couple, Ed Warren, the self-described demonologist, and Lorraine Warren, who claimed to be a clairvoyant and medium, husband and wife. For decades, they positioned themselves as investigators of the paranormal. But positioning yourself as something is one thing. Being recognized and believed is another. Over time, they became two of the most famous figures in that world. If you've seen The Conjuring or any of its spin-offs, including Annabelle, you've already met their cinematic counterparts, calm, devout, courageous, almost saintly in their composure. I've watched the films. Maybe you have too. Maybe that's how you first heard of the Warrens. But here's where things begin to split. Film is art, and art requires adaptation. Adaptation requires compression, amplification, sometimes embellishment. The real Warrens were not framed by perfect lighting or swelling violins. And once you remove the soundtrack, what's left is far more complicated. In this series, I'm not here to debunk the movies. That would completely miss the point. Horror films are not court transcripts. Instead, what I want to do with you all is something slower, more careful. Just stripping away the Hollywood fog and reconstruct the story using publicly available records, media reports, interviews, court documents, and the Warrens' own autobiographical accounts. This is fact-based. It's a reconstruction. And so because of that, this is going to involve a little more disturbing material. These cases tend to involve murder, allegations of abuse, and claims of demonic influence. So if you're watching all the way through, feel free to leave a small warning timestamp comment before particularly intense segments. Just think of it as though you're handing the next viewer a flashlight before they walk into the dark. Now let's go back. Ed Warren was born September 7th, 1926 in Connecticut. His father was a police officer, a detail that feels almost symbolic in hindsight. Law and order on one side of the household, allegations of the supernatural on the other. According to Ed's own autobiography, the strange began early, and from the very beginning, the story relies on one source. Ed himself. He claimed that when he was around 5 years old, a nun began appearing to him in his dreams. She would visit regularly, speak with him, offer guidance. Imagine a child calmly telling his father, "A nun visits me every night." Most parents would panic, call a doctor or a priest. But according to Ed, his father did neither. Instead, he allegedly told his son not to be afraid, that the nun was his aunt, a relative who had died before Ed was born. And here is where the story immediately bends into something difficult to verify. They had never met. She died before he existed. Yet Ed claimed they spoke often, that she told him about future events, that she predicted he would help many priests in his lifetime, but would never become one himself. Interestingly, that part turned out to be true. Despite what many people assume, especially after seeing the films, Ed Warren was never ordained as a Catholic priest, not once. He also did not have the church's formal authority to perform exorcisms, which means the authority viewers often associate with him was cinematic. The Warrens described themselves as devout Catholics. Over time, they became known as lay demonologists. In simple terms, that means religious outsiders, not clergy, who claimed expertise in demonic phenomena. It's a strange position to occupy, adjacent to the church, occasionally consulted, but not officially endorsed as representatives of the church. Now let's turn to Lorraine. Lorraine Warren was born January 31st, 1927, also in Connecticut, close in age to Ed, raised in a similar Catholic environment, and she too described unusual experiences from childhood. In the 1980 book, The Demonologist, which chronicles their lives, there's a story about Lorraine at age 12. Her class was planting trees, small saplings pressed into fresh soil. Lorraine looked up, and instead of seeing a thin sapling, she claimed she saw a fully grown tree, tall, mature, branches swaying. She stared at it. A nun approached and asked what she was looking at. "The tree," Lorraine reportedly replied. The nun asked whether she was seeing the tree as it would be in the future. Lorraine said yes, or at least she believed she was. Later in life, she would describe this as clairvoyance, the ability to perceive events beyond normal sensory experience. But at 12, it wasn't a gift. It was something to suppress. And at the time, it also wasn't something that was celebrated. According to their accounts, Lorraine was isolated for these experiences, sent away for additional prayer, and discouraged from speaking about what she saw. Whether that response came from fear, theological caution, or simple confusion is still unclear, but the message was unmistakable. Keep this quiet. So she did. For years, Ed and Lorraine, come to think of it, were again born just months apart. They grew up streets away from one another, and yet they didn't meet until they were 16. The setting was almost cinematic. Ed was working at a movie theater. Lorraine came to watch a film. They noticed each other. Afterward, Ed spent 10 cents on an ice cream soda for her. 10 cents. That's how this story begins. In the mid-1940s, when he was 17, Ed enlisted in the U.S. Navy during World War II. Months later, his ship collided with another vessel in the North Atlantic. The crew abandoned ship. Ed survived. During leave after that incident, he proposed to Lorraine. They married. Soon after, he returned to service. When he finally came home for good, their daughter was already 6 months old. War was over. They were young. They also had a child, and they needed money. Ed had studied art growing up, so he began painting to support his family. Like many artists, success did not come quickly until one particular painting. He painted a haunted house, but he didn't just sell the canvas. He told a story about it, a dramatic backstory, a history layered with tragedy and alleged supernatural events. People gathered, they listened, and the painting sold for more than he expected. That moment changed everything. The painting mattered, but the story attached to it mattered more, and that realization would quietly shape everything that followed. Soon, he and Lorraine began traveling to reported haunted houses. Ed would paint them. Lorraine would claim to sense spiritual presences. They would tell the stories. The painting sold. The legend grew. In 1952, they also founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, an organization they described as dedicated to investigating paranormal phenomena. But for over 2 decades, they remained relatively obscure. Their names didn't become nationally recognized until 1974. That year, in Amityville, New York, 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his parents and 4 siblings while they slept. He later claimed he was influenced by voices. A young couple, George and Kathy Lutz, moved into the house afterward. They reported terrifying experiences, foul odors, cold spots, alleged apparitions. They fled after 28 days. The story exploded into a media phenomenon known as the Amityville Horror. The Warrens did investigate this house. That is documented. What is far less clear is how much their involvement actually changed anything. Critics have argued that many of the more sensational elements were exaggerated later. Supporters insist the phenomena were genuine. But here is the measurable fact. After Amityville, the Warrens' public profile surged. They began appearing regularly on radio and television. They spoke about earlier cases, including the 1968 Annabelle doll investigation and the 1971 Perron family haunting, which later inspired The Conjuring 2 and other films in the franchise. Before 1974, they were niche investigators. After 1974, they were national figures. And decades later, the image that had been polished for years began to fracture. In 2013, after the release of The Conjuring, allegations resurfaced regarding Ed Warren's personal life. A woman named Judith Penny signed an affidavit claiming that back in the 1960s, when she was 14, she began a relationship with Ed, who was then in his 30s. She alleged that she lived with the Warrens for years as Ed's partner, and that Lorraine was aware of the alleged affair. According to Penny, Lorraine publicly introduced her as Ed's niece. Supporters of the Warrens dispute this account. They claim Penny was 18 when she moved in, that she worked as a live-in helper, and that she had her own boyfriend, whom she later married. Lawyers on both sides challenged timelines and credibility. No criminal charges were filed, and the allegations remain contested. Another detail drew attention, however. When Lorraine licensed their life rights to filmmakers, contracts reportedly included clauses prohibiting depictions of the couple committing crimes, including sexual misconduct, or misrepresenting their marriage. Some view that as standard legal procedure and protection, but others interpret it as image control. So interpretation here depends heavily on prior belief, and belief is the gravitational force around which this entire story orbits. Ed Warren died on August 23, 2006, in Connecticut at the age of 79. Lorraine Warren died on April 18, 2019, at 92. They are gone, but their legend is not. It lives in film franchises, in haunted museums, in believers who credit them with confronting evil, in skeptics who call them skilled storytellers at best, frauds at worst. So what were they? Investigators? Narrators? Media-savvy entrepreneurs? Or something in between? Over the next few episodes, we're going to examine some of their most famous cases, slowly, carefully, and piece by piece. Not to ruin the magic, but to understand the difference between what we take as legend and what stands as the record.